Welcome to World of DaaS, a show for data enthusiasts. I'm your host, Auren Hoffman, CEO of SafeGraph. For more conversations, videos, and transcripts, visit safegraph.com/podcasts. Welcome, Stephen. Welcome to the World of DaaS podcast. Really excited to have you on the show.
Awesome to be here, Auren. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to have a discussion with you.
All right, so let's dive into the AWS Data Exchange. I think it's like a super interesting play for AWS. Like, just kind of like just give us like the brief backstory. Like, what's the history? Like, how did it actually happen? Like, was it just some idea? Were you guys brainstorming on the whiteboard and all, or was it like very obvious from the beginning, or was it just kind of a non-obvious manifestation that some customer came through, or how did it happen?
Yeah. So the story is very similar to, in fact, identical in a way to any service that AWS or Amazon really starts. We do everything by working backwards from the customer and what they actually need, what problems they're telling us, how we can make their lives easier. And in this particular case, I started at Amazon 6.5 years ago. I was leading our enterprise strategy globally, basically talking to big enterprise customers about their just overall move to the cloud. And one of the things that we kept hearing was, hey, it's great that the cloud makes it cheaper, better, faster for us to develop our applications, analytics, and machine learning models. But a lot of the times, these applications, analytics, and now machine learning depend on data that we don't already have. And hey, it's really weird that I have all these awesome tools on the cloud, but when I need to go get data from somewhere else, from a vendor I work with or a website or whatever, I'm still stuck pulling FTP sites. Some of our customers still ship hard drives to each other, or having to hit dozens or if not hundreds of different API endpoints. So we just started to study that problem, and we did what I went through the same process. We call it the working backwards process, where we write a press release and a set of accompanying FAQs around what we would launch, what the customer problem is, and what we would launch to solve it. And I went through that process for a long time. It's an onerous process where you talk to lots of customers, you get lots of feedback, you seek.
And do you have to like build like a business? Do you have to like go get budget from someone? And so you have to like build a business plan internally? Is there like an internal VC that you go to? Like you get your Series A or something? Or how does it work?
Yeah. So when you're writing, so it depends. There's a bunch of different approaches you could take. In this particular case, in my approach, since I wasn't in the product and services area for AWS, I was in our field organization talking to customers. So I wrote this PRFAQ, which ended up including a business case on not just what the customer value proposition was, but how is it going to be how is it going to be beneficial for customers, and then what's in it for AWS too. And so all of that ended up in a fairly comprehensive, in this case it ended up being a set of documents that we reviewed over a period of time before Andy Jassy, who's the CEO of AWS, currently on his way to becoming the CEO of Amazon overall, as everybody probably knows, basically gave it the thumbs up, and we got our funding to start the business and launched it in November of 2019.
The way I think of the data exchange is almost similar to the way people might think of Amazon as a store. Like it's a store to go find, discover, and buy data. You learn about the different types of data that you want, just like you might learn about a charger you might need for your laptop or something like that on Amazon. Do you think of it similar?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of parallels to data exchange, both to the Amazon retail marketplace, but also to AWS as a marketplace for third-party software.
Which you now are starting to run. So congratulations on that.
Yes.
That's obviously a really big deal.
Yes, as a little bit of an aside, I started the data exchange businesses, as we said. And anyway, I'll kind of come on to that in a second, but we ended up putting the data exchange business next to AWS Marketplace because we knew, and it was true, that there was a lot of APIs and processes and mechanisms that AWS Marketplace had built to help ISV partners vend third-party software to our customers. And so we used a lot of that plumbing and infrastructure to start AWS Data Exchange as well, because of the similarities that you pointed out. And I'm in a very fortunate position. A couple of weeks ago, My boss, Dave McCann, who ran the marketplace and who I worked for to start Data Exchange, has decided to downshift and play a part-time role at Amazon moving forward. And I was asked to oversee all of the marketplace as well as Data Exchange and a couple of other services we have. So
one of the interesting things about marketplace and also the AWS Data Exchange is kind of like how you guys have figured out how to incent your own internal salespeople and customer success people to sell other people's stuff, right? Because when you're selling AWS, there's a certain margin that you can play with. And it's a little bit easier to figure out how do you commission your salespeople when you're selling the data and you're selling the AWS marketplace. The margins compress because it's other people's things, I presume, right?
yeah.
So you have less to play with. So there was kind of like a real innovation in AWS marketplace on how they commission their salespeople, which I think you borrowed for the AWS Data Exchange. Is that right? And can you explain that?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that are going on here, and I think it's kind of useful to unpack several of them. So just like we work backwards from customers for how we develop product using the working backwards process that I mentioned, pretty much our entire sales strategy is helping a customer be successful, do something on AWS, by working with our solutions architects, our professional services teams, whatever the sort of way we're helping a customer. And then we then celebrate that. This customer was able to achieve X with their business outcome, which was better for them for these reasons. And then we celebrate that both with the rest of our sellers across AWS, but also just more broadly as part of kind of our marketing, because we believe there's no better person, place, entity to tell the story of how customers can be successful than customers themselves. So we built the marketplace and Data Exchange in a very similar way, where the best thing to motivate the sellers in our field teams is to see how a few things work, and then how they could take those sort of wins and what a customer did to customers that looked like them, and kind of have a similar conversation. So just to give you an example, we had a number of customers in the food services industry who were using location data, for example, which I know SafeGraph is specializes in and has helped partner with us for some of these customers. And they wanted to know, as COVID and the pandemic has gone through its kind of life cycle over the last couple of years, what foot traffic was going to look like in their establishments. So we had one food distributor and food services company do that, and we celebrated that, and we took that to the account teams who work with other food distributors, and they had those similar conversations with their customers. And the great part about that is not only are we able to then tell the story through the lens of customer success, but those customers tend to then use that data in more analytics to drive, even more differentiating capabilities for their business intelligence or whatever, which of course then drives additional AWS adoption as well.
One of the things as an outsider I find like super fascinating about Amazon as a company is, yes, it's incredibly innovative. It has all these great technical innovations, and then it's kind of known for its like customer centric innovation. Like there are things that just will never change. Customers always want low prices. They always want speedy delivery. Like that will never change. But there's also all these like organizational behavior innovations that Amazon has. It's got like the 2 pizza rule. It kind of like, it really like champion microservices. Again, like the way the salespeople are kind of done is in some ways very, I mean, I think a lot of people are copying all these things throughout it. Is there something about like the water and Amazon that it's constantly creating all these, like, because it's a fairly big place, and as big places are not known for innovations, especially not organizational behavior innovations.
Yeah. So look, I'll give you the synthesis that you might hear Jeff say, Jeff Bezos, our founder, and then I'll give you sort of some of my own kind of opinions around that. Jeff will say 3 of the things that have kept Amazon successful and has been able to grow our business the way we have is one, to be customer obsessed and constantly listening to the customer and what they want. And customers have this amazing quality of being perpetually dissatisfied. They're always going to tell you what they want you to do differently or more of or better or whatever. And you can take that, listen to it, and continue to build a pretty valuable business for them. The second thing he would say is that we're not afraid to invent and pioneer. Even if that means sometimes it's inventing some sort of overlapping value proposition with something else we have at Amazon. And I think that's a little bit unique when you were talking about some of these big companies who might not move as quickly or whatever. Oftentimes they're worried about cannibalization or inventing something. Like it's just not part of the way we think about things. If it's a customer need and we think we can solve it in a unique, long-lasting value creation way, we'll do that. And the third thing is the long-term focus, and being patient is the way he kind of describes it. So the sort of combination of those three things, you said, is there something in the water? I think the combination of those three things is the way he kind of drives the company. And then from my perspective, my personal opinion, in terms of like how we're able to scale so many of these different businesses, we have these things called the leadership principles, and there's 14 of them. And each of them are very well thought out, and I wasn't around for this, but we're, hotly debated and literally every word about them. And I think of them as tenets or beliefs on how each of us as leaders in the company operate with one another. And the sort of magic, if you will, said, is it the magic in the water? The magic with the leadership principles is, if I have an initiative and I need to drive something from another team or take a dependency on another team or need to reach out to somebody about an opportunity somewhere else in Amazon, and maybe it's somebody I've never worked with before, never met, we've never done anything together, I know in the way I'm approaching them, asking my questions, getting answers, and collaborating with them, the rubric by which they're evaluating the opportunity and how they're going to work back with me, because we have these leadership principles that are written down.
So there's like a common language, a common formula. So it's almost like an API for people. So how to interact with one another.
Nobody's ever put it to me that way, but that is a very fascinating and I think apropos way to put it, an API for people. Yeah, I mean, and look, so I was a student of Amazon long before I came here.
Yeah.
And in 2007 or 8, I guess it was, I was leading engineering teams at Bloomberg, and I heard about AWS launching S3. Well, first I got fascinated with it because my wife started to buy diapers and paper towels and everything for the house from this online store, and I didn't understand that. And then, they started to launch cloud services, and I was like, who is this company? And I started to learn about the leadership principles, and I just blatantly stole some of it into my own leadership philosophy. And it made me a better leader without fully understanding it. Then I got to Amazon 6.5 years ago. And if I'm being honest, when you first get here, we do doc reads for every meeting, and everybody sits silently for the first 15, 20 minutes of every meeting while we're reading a doc. And then we have a sort of a healthy debate around it. And these leadership principles, as you said, an API for people, they get thrown around the room like Frisbees. And in the beginning, it's like, wow, this is pretty intense. This is pretty serious. But it didn't take me very long. I was like, wow, as sort of strange as that may seem for a newcomer, it really works. And it has like this crazy alignment property.
All right, let's double click into the data, and then like I later want to just understand like kind of more of the mechanics of like how other data companies can be successful, because a lot of data companies are listening in, how they could be successful on the AWS data exchange. It seems a good idea for a data science team, let's say your data science team at McDonald's or something like that, to first focus on like doing good data science on your own internal data that you're already creating. And then once you get to some sort of level on the curve of getting good at that, then you might want to bring in external data. Is that the way you think of it? And obviously you don't want to get all the way through where like there's an asymptote where you're not getting anything out of your internal data anymore. So where on the curve should like an organization like McDonald's start investing in external data?
Yeah, I certainly agree that investing in data science practices in today's day and age is a no regret move, whether it's for your own data and better business intelligence around it, or something that you're going to augment later with third-party data. And in fact, I would maybe be a little bit stronger than call it a no regret move. If I could be a little bit, I don't know if this is controversial or not, but I think if you're not, as a company, investing in it, you better be careful, because your competitors are, and they're looking for any angle that they can to better compete. And data science is certainly going to be a growing area and spot where they're going to be able to do that. So I think investing in it and building muscle around it and understanding your customers and their behavior and your partners and their behavior is like, that's just going to become increasingly important. As you do that, you will find more opportunity to go get third-party data sources that you might not otherwise have used. Advertising is a very common example. The advertising industry advertisers have been augmenting their own data with who they want to be able to target ads with, for a long time. And that's not new. And then I would sort of say that there's this other bucket of use cases where a customer is in some position, or a company is in some position where they just have a question that they need to answer because there's like a systemic risk to their business, or because they have a hypothesis that they need to vet, and they may or may not have any data science practice, and they may or may not have any first-party data to be able to go answer it. And even if they did have the first-party data, oftentimes this data is siloed away in organizations, and there's some IT gatekeeper who sees over it, and it's too hard to go get. So they go out to tender or to the market anyway and go find something. So then there's the very sort of specific use case-driven data sets. And that's one of the things that we've seen, particularly again around the pandemic, where all of a sudden there was a huge shift in everybody's behavior across pretty much any dimension you could possibly imagine. And every business was trying to understand what that was going to mean for them. So, frankly, I was super nervous because we launched the business, and 3 months later, at least in North America, the pandemic hit. And I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And a lot of the status quo stuff we would have done, particularly around like financial services, kind of, was put on hold. But all these companies needed to figure out what the pandemic meant for them. And that was their catalyst, data science practice or not, to sort of get started with it.
If you're a data buyer, you're McDonald's or your Domino's or whoever, and you're coming on, you want to like, there's so much data on the data exchange. Like, how do you even find what you're looking for? Yes, there's search mechanisms and stuff, but how do you end up like with a good experience getting the right data that's right for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And if I'm being honest, I think that's an area where we're not just data exchange, but just generally speaking, the industry has a lot more work to do to kind of make it easier to get to insights from a huge treasure trove of data. So you're right, we have search capabilities, and there's a number of different ways that you can facet our catalog by searching through various industries or terms or what have you. On top of that, we have what we call data exchange customer advisors, and particularly for customers who are either heavily using the service or we believe over time are going to heavily use the service because they're predisposed to using lots of third-party data. We work directly with them, and we'll understand through our account teams who are usually already working with them, because we benefit from having millions of customers already worldwide using AWS services, to understand what data they need and why, for what use cases, to power what tools.
Do you imagine there's like a collaborative filter that happens? Like, if you buy this data, you should buy this other, or if you use these tools in AWS, you might be more interested in. Do you imagine something like a little bit more sophisticated happens in the future?
I do. I think, we already see that happening in a little bit more of a scrappy approach than you're kind of describing. And I would just kind of tie that back to what I was saying with the use cases. When we see a customer really successful, one of our customers built a dashboard to help them optimize their supply chain in times of the pandemic, for example. And they service both supermarkets and restaurants. And at the beginning of the pandemic, all the restaurant traffic shifted to supermarkets. but it was very dependent on location, because Florida versus New York versus California versus Texas,
Yeah.
populations there took very different approaches to social distancing. So they couldn't take a uniform approach. So they used a lot of location data among a number of other data sources to sort of build dashboards around that. We took that, we packaged it up, and we celebrated that. And then we saw other customers do similar things. And then we had another customer in a completely different industry, Huron Consulting Group, in healthcare and life sciences, build comparable dashboards, but for different purposes, to help their customers who were like the Mercy ambulatory centers and other healthcare provider institutions, to help them kind of optimize staff and shift changes. So we do kind of see that. It's a little more kind of learning it as we go and iterative than maybe some master algorithm like you've described. But we're going to keep getting better at it and iterating on it and make it better and better over time.
As you join data sets together, it's not like 1 + 1 = 2. There's some sort of like exponential value as you join these things together. And they really only become valuable as you join them together. So if you just bought data and it just sat there, it doesn't give you as much value as if you can integrate it into your own systems. And one of the ways, of course, to do that is like some sort of join key where you can like join them together. We've been involved at SafeGraph in an open sourced initiative called Place Key to join data about places together. But there's many other types of things. Like, how do you guys?
I would say you have a particularly rich background in this space. The stuff you did before SafeGraph as well. But yes.
How do you guys think about like these join keys, and how do you, because obviously like the more these join keys exist, the better it is for AWS, both because they'll buy more data through AWS and they'll probably consume a lot more services because they're bringing in much more data and they're able to use it more. So I'm sure you and the customer will probably get more value. So how do you think about like which join keys you try to promote, which join key, how do you think about this whole kind of thing through your own lens?
I think I'll start by saying this. We took a decision or a tenet, an operating belief when we started the service, that data providers just fundamentally know their data and their customers and the use cases for their data by customers better than we ever could, particularly at the sort of scale we're going for, where we want to have any data set that our customers want on the service. So it's very industry, domain, niche, use case specific. So there was no way we would be able to predetermine schemas, taxonomies, formats of data. We wanted to be as flexible as possible because we just fundamentally believe that customers want the best choice. We're not opinionated on how providers sort of pick and package and what join keys, if at all, they use any. Now, that leads to the conversation with customers, undoubtedly, which you're describing, which is, okay, this is great, but I need to marry this with my own first-party data, or I want to pull these 4 data sets together, and how do I do that? I think one of the reasons that this is an interesting business for AWS is because we have another 200 plus services in our portfolio that help our customers do stuff with data. So we work with customers, and our account teams, our solutions architects, help them take the data that they're getting from Data Exchange and then use it in the rest of AWS, which oftentimes comes down to joining that data. And I think you will see us continue to innovate in this space where when data providers can have a little bit more knobs on how they're describing their data as they publish it to customers, so that it can be more easily and quickly, I'll call it activatable in sort of air quotes. As they
it's certainly one of the biggest hindrances to buying data is like, hey, I know this data is going to be valuable, but it's going to take me 50 hours to do the whole ETL to get it into my system. And I've got a lot of other engineering priorities. I don't want to take the 50. Now, if it took 50 seconds to move it into my system, I'll happily spend the money. So it's not the money. It's, I just don't want to spend the money and have this data sit on a shelf. I want to actually spend it and get it useful right away.
Yes. I said there's one other sort of area worth exploring here. So we're also working on partnerships where there might be a ISV tool. ISV is independent software vendor, like a tool that a customer already uses to reason about their data. And we are plugging our APIs into more and more tools so that when a customer subscribes to data on Data Exchange, they can very quickly use it in a tool that they want, whether that's an AWS first-party tool or one of our partners' tools. And an example I would give you, Deloitte, who many of you know is the big consultancy and auditing firm, they have a business which is neither of those things. It's actually a software business, and it's called Converge Health. And it's a set of software tools that they license to healthcare and life sciences companies, namely the ones we're involved in are to pharma companies. And pharma companies have a lot of data scientists and modelers who are looking at all sorts of data around what they call real world evidence, how drugs are actually used in the wild, how long they're adhered to by patients, how often doctors prescribe them, what their efficacy rates are, so on and so forth. And so this Converge Health business has a tool that these data scientists within these pharma companies use to model and ask questions of data that they have within the pharma company. Well, oftentimes that data scientist will be searching for something. Let's say they're looking for comorbidities between, diabetes and coronavirus, for example.
Yeah.
And they might not have the data already for whatever reason. So they've built an integration with us so they can also search the Data Exchange catalog, click a button to send off a procurement workflow that goes to their compliance department to then kind of procure the data through Data Exchange once it kind of meets all their standards and governance requirements. And then assuming that it does, they are a click away from having that modeled within their tool.
That's even an extra barrier because it has to be HIPAA compliant, it has to be done in the right way. And, these patient records are incredibly valuable. And so you have to figure out a way how to move it in a de-identified way. That's super interesting. Now, for like a data owner, so like a company like SafeGraph, we're a data owner. We put our data on AWS Data Exchange. We want potential data buyers to be able to find our data. So, what advice would you be like how to list it or how to SEO it on it and how to use the right keywords so it's found or do we work with like the AWS reps or to help educate them, or what advice would you give to a company like us?
Yeah, I would say all of the above, of all the things that you said. We do give some best practices for the listing based on the stuff that we're constantly learning, by the way. I mean, the service is a year and a half old, so I wouldn't say we have all the answers yet. But as we continue to find ways to optimize listings, they are all indexed by search engines. So if you search for AWS Data Exchange SafeGraph, you should find the listings that you have on us. And then if you put certain keywords in there, they would come up as well. And then again, I'll kind of come back to the how we help our sellers worldwide understand is that we kind of get some wins together and we work with the customer to help them solve some of their use cases and get that out there. But the other thing I would say is, people are really willing to use free data sets. Obviously, it's a lot easier when it doesn't cost any money. And then the more expensive it gets, the more sort of scrupulous and the longer the sales cycle is going to become. So I think it's really valuable to have a number of, whether you consider it a free trial or a sample or, data providers use different words for the way they kind of describe that. But having something where customers can kind of get a feel and understand how they're going to join it with their other data sets or how they're going to, even if it's just like the schema with 10 rows, for example, those sort of data sets lead to the conversation for some sort of like larger deal. And the idea that you would be able to list a data set, whether it's on our data exchange or list anything anywhere, in my opinion, for 6 figures or more, which a lot of these data sets are worth. And somebody's just going to come and click a button and buy it is like, that just doesn't happen. So
how does the buying motion work? Just like, is it somebody comes, they see some data, they download, as you mentioned, a small number of rows and kind of check it out. And then they hit like contact sales. And when they hit contact sales, are they talking to the company that sells the data, or are they talking to their AWS rep, or how does it work?
So the answer is yes.
Or a bot somewhere.
The answer is yes. A lot of it often starts with the free trial, and testing it out. There's at a couple $100 or a couple $1,000, we do drive
Yep.
self-service subscriptions. So at those levels, if the listing is clear enough, the value from the data is well articulated enough, we do have some customers who will of course just buy it and put it on their AWS invoice. When it starts to get higher value, it's very important. And I think if it's one thing that everybody leaves with, we are facilitating sort of transactions and hopefully accelerating the sales cycles for our data providers and ultimately getting customers what they want, but they still maintain a commercial relationship with the data provider. So it's a requirement for all of our listings where everybody has a support email and channel that they're active on, and we test that. You can't just like throw up some support email and never answer. That's something we monitor in our catalog because we want our customers to have a great experience. So the customer, in practice, they do both. They reach directly out to the data provider sometimes, and sometimes they just reach out to their AWS rep because maybe they have a great relationship with the AWS rep. And then the AWS rep will reach out to my team and we'll start the dialogue with the data provider. But when you're talking about some of these higher value data sets, that will often then go into, okay, well, I wanted a trial, but your trial didn't have what I wanted. So we have a number of features and capabilities where you can package up private products for whatever fee or commercial terms you want that aren't listed in the public catalog. You can still do all that directly through the service in sort of a hand-to-hand way with your customers. And we support, kind of everything that's needed to follow that sales cycle through to the end.
One of the things is, to me, that's interesting about what you do. So anyone who's ever used AWS knows that you can commit to a certain amount of spend. And if you commit to this certain amount of spend, let's say for a year, you get certain discounts and certain higher levels of support. And the more you commit to, the more you get, which makes sense. And I know that both for AWS Marketplace and for the data exchange, that at least some percentage of those dollars goes toward that commit, which to me kind of blew my mind and was really, really cool. Like, how did that decision, that kind of sounds like a small thing, but it does seem to really start to drive a lot of behavior for the end customer.
Yeah, so we a bunch of years ago, AWS started doing what we now call private pricing agreements, where our customer starts to get bigger and bigger and using AWS in a more meaningful way, and in exchange for some usage commitments over a period of time, they get a number of benefits, some service discounts among them, and this decision actually predates me. For marketplace purchases, as you said, a portion of the spend that goes through the marketplace lands towards that commit. And then when we built Data Exchange, it was only natural to kind of follow in the same motions because it's such a similar business, as you kind of pointed out in the very beginning. So we follow in the same suit, and that can be very beneficial. Like, the cool thing about that is we get to have conversations with more than just the kind of data buyer persona, because then it's also the procurement professionals at some of these big enterprises who's they're incentivized at optimizing just overall corporate spend, and they're used to dealing with AWS in the invoice, so it becomes a benefit for them too, where they can they can make improvements to their overall financial spends by starting to combine some of these concepts.
Now, this might be a little bit like long-term, little crazy thinking and stuff like that, but you can imagine, so you have these like data science and machine learning models that are being run on AWS tools for a lot of your clients, and they're trying to optimize something, right? Optimize whatever revenue or whatever they're trying to do to optimize. They've got some sort of optimization function. And you can imagine a scenario where you could just like, all they care about is optimization of that data science model. They don't even care what the data inputs are. And then you could help them like bring in the different data that will help optimize that more and be better. And then they'll gladly just pay, instead of paying for the data, they'll gladly pay from going to like 0.8 accuracy to 0.85 accuracy, or something, whatever metric they're looking at in the models.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what the future holds. I will say this, in addition to Data Exchange, we I actually launched before Data Exchange. We have a machine learning model marketplace. It's part of the AWS Marketplace family, which is also now part of my remit. Uh, but we've got several dozen machine learning models that customers can then that run in their own secure container inside of their accounts, where the vendor who's vending the model doesn't see the data that the customer is inputting into the model, that the customer is just getting the inferences that were pre-trained by the vendor who listed it. So um, I don't know if it quite sort of gets to the nirvana that you were describing, where it's like, hey, here's my business outcome that I'm looking for. Help me optimize to that. And you can imagine that they're just going to be paying by a basis point. Every basis
Yeah.
point you improve it, I will pay X. I think that's an interesting idea, and maybe one that we can explore together.
AWS really kind of like pioneered on this data exchange, but you can imagine its competitors like Azure and stuff like also opening up a data marketplace. Like, how do you see it like playing out over time? Will there be like multiple data marketplaces? Do you think will there be a marketplace of marketplaces? Like, how do you think it works out?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So far be it for me to opine on what another company might or might not do in the same space. I will say that we continually hear from customers that they want more data to make better decisions. So we got enough signal that suggested it was important for us to do. So I would assume that other companies who might look like us are also getting similar signal. I can't predict that they will. What I can say is we're going to keep listening to customers on what we've built and what they want us to do with it, not just with the data that we're offering through Data Exchange, but what they want to do with it in all these other services. You just mentioned a use case around model optimization, and we're pretty fortunate that we get to be involved in some of these conversations, which may not have anything to do directly with Data Exchange. It's more of an analytical tool that we need to build to better serve a particular use case. And we then either incubate those ideas in my team, or we talk about them with other service teams around AWS who have sort of the right portfolio of services for it to fit into, and we're going to keep doing that forever.
Okay, I think our listeners who run data businesses or consume data find this super, super interesting. Let me just wrap with a few personal questions. I'm always interested in the personal side. So, I mean, you wrote this book, Ahead in the Cloud. It's got like 220 reviews on Amazon. Like, my guess is like 93% of our listeners want to write a book. Like, what advice would you give to these people? Because you self-published this, right?
Oh boy, I did self-publish the book. Yeah. So the story behind the book, when I first started at AWS 6.5 years ago, my role was go talk to technology executives from the world's largest companies and help them understand the change that is required to modernize their IT, not just their infrastructure, but their operating model, their people, their approach to, moving from plan, build, run, or ITIL to DevOps or whatever. Having done it before as the CIO of Dow Jones, that's how I landed in that role. I decided to join AWS to help other big companies through some of the changes that I have all the scars to prove leading, and all the mistakes I made to help other companies maybe not make them again. And when I went out and talked to customers for years, I would learn a lot. They'd ask me lots of questions. They would say that their assertions or assumptions on something are X. And I was like, well, maybe you should think about X a little bit differently. And here's why, and here would be your approach. And so I started to write all these blogs. And the blogs were based on conversations I was having with customers where I felt maybe there's enough either misperception or meat on the bone of some idea that I could write a small piece on it. Fast forward a couple of years, and I had dozens of these blogs, and I had kind of planned with, okay, if I can write enough blog posts that are, when you put together, make a sensible narrative, maybe I can blog my way into a book, which, as I understand it, other people before me have done as well. So I kind of got to that point, and I thought I had enough content for a book. I had written a series on the stages of adoption, as I call it, and 7 best practices for enterprises moving to the cloud. And I was like, okay, I'm going to write a book. I talked to a bunch of people who have written books. Adrian Cockcroft is one I would mention. He's also at AWS. He's a fairly well-known figure in the technology space, having spent a bunch of years at Netflix and Sun and elsewhere. And he's like, every page you write turns into 10, and it's way harder than you think it's going to be. And I'm stubborn.
You're kind of more of an engineering background. Like, you're not like a journalist background. Did you like hire someone to help you like edit it or?
So yes, but I ended up, and that was very helpful to organize my thoughts and structure certain things. But you know, you only get one reputation in life. And at the end of the day, I wanted to make sure it was my reputation and my voice and thoughts coming through. So
and are you writing it between like 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. every night, or?
Yeah. So I thought because I was starting with all these blogs, I was off to such a good head start, and I was 80% of the way done. And this is what Adrian was trying to tell me. No, you're not. And I didn't listen because I'm stubborn. And when people tell me something's hard, I wanted to do it more. And I went ahead and did it. And what I thought was going to be a 100-hour exercise turned into a multi-thousand-hour exercise.
Oh my gosh.
I was doing this. Yes.
Okay. I'm not writing a book now. Okay. Yeah. I think you've just that 93% literally just went to like 23% in that last few sentences.
It is not for the faint of heart. And look, you know, I'm very happy with the way it turned out. A lot of people who have read it have given me lots of kudos, but even so, like, you know, it's not perfect. Some people have read it, and the negative reviews that I do have are people saying, yeah, you could tell it's a collection of blog posts. That's outfavored by the people who said they've learned something. So that's why I'm kind of happy with the result. But you know,
all right, two more personal questions. One is, you live in the Westchester area. I happen to have done an extremely rigorous study of the best places to eat near Mamaroneck. Okay, so what the most controversial question I'm going to ask you right now is, what's better, Sal's Pizza or Walter's hot dogs?
For me, that's easy, Sal's.
All right. Okay, here we go. Sal's right here.
Yeah.
Sal's Pizza. Best pizza in the world. Anyone who doesn't say it's not the best pizza in the world just doesn't know what they're talking about.
I agree.
Okay, so I'm definitely with you. Okay. Yeah, Walter's is the best hot dog in the world. So if you want a good hot dog, I just think pizza beats hot dog, but Walter's for sure is the best hot dog, and then Sal's is the best pizza.
So we moved to Larchmont in Westchester 8 years ago, and my wife brought Sal's Pizza home. I don't know, second week we lived here or whatever, and she's like, "Oh, you're gonna love this pizza. It's the best pizza." And we had moved from New York City, and of course I was like, "Whatever."
Yeah, exactly.
From New York City, and I ate the pizza, and I was like, "Oh my God, this is the best pizza," and we eat it once a week.
All right. Well, I think after this podcast, the net sales of Sal's and Walter's is going to go up at least 15% each. Okay. Last question we asked all of our guests. Okay. What would you tell yourself from high school or college to save yourself time or money or emotional well-being?
History can be a predictor of the future.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Let's dive in. What do you mean?
Yeah. So you said it just a couple of minutes ago. I'm an engineer. And when I was a kid, from a very early age, I was always interested in computers, but I was good at science and math, and I hated everything else. And to the point where I'm lucky I got out of high school. I'm lucky I got into any kind of college. And I went to a SUNY school in New York. And today, the same SUNY school I went into wouldn't have let me in with the grades I had in college, largely because I ignored all of the social sciences, the social studies, history. And writing, frankly. So that's maybe why writing a book was even harder for me. It wasn't something I focused on until I was in my late 20s. My wife, Megan, I married a history teacher. And the little that I have tried to educate myself with over the course of the last couple of years, when I realized that was a regret, you know, I learned a lot. And a lot of those things are very applicable to things that I'm doing today, even in a tech environment. So, if I could say anything to myself and have a hope that I would listen 25 years ago, it was to actually pay attention in history class.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Stephen Orban, thank you so much for coming on World of DaaS podcast. It's been really great. Great to see you again. And congrats again on your huge promotion to run AWS Marketplace. Congrats on that as well.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure, as always, and I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the show, consider leaving a review. For more World of DaaS, and that's DAAS, DaaS, you could subscribe right here on our YouTube channel, or you could find me on Twitter at Auren, AUREN, Auren. I'd love to hear from you.